You know that feeling when you try to carry water in your bare hands?
Oh, yeah, it is the
Right.
worst.
Like no matter how tightly you squeeze your fingers together or, how much sheer physical effort you exert, it just inevitably leaks out.
Yep, every single
You
time.
start at the sink with this full, heavy scoop, but by the time you actually reach your destination, you look down and you've got maybe, I don't know, 3 pathetic drops left.
It's a completely demoralizing experience, really, because the failure happens despite your best intentions.
Ah, good.
You put in the maximum amount of physical effort to hold on, and the system just, it just fails you anyway.
And that physical frustration perfectly mirrors what learning new information often feels like for so many of us.
Oh, absolutely.
We sit down, we cram this massive stack of new facts into our brains, we hold on as tight as we can, and we tell ourselves we're going to remember every single detail.
And then
Then we wake up the next day, and the cognitive water is completely gone.
just vanish.
Yeah. So today's deep dive is about deconstructing the cognitive architecture of memory to figure out how to finally, plug those leaks.
It's such an important topic.
It really is. We are pulling from some incredibly insightful source material today. It's a conversation from an English learning platform between two speakers, Emily and Paul.
Right, and they do a great job breaking it down.
They really do. They break down the actual mechanics of why we forget and, much more importantly, how we actually remember.
And they approach this by tackling a highly universal scenario. I mean, every listener tuning in has undoubtedly experienced this exact thing.
Oh, 100%.
Whether you are actively trying to learn a new language or, say, prepping for a high-stakes corporate presentation or just trying to retain the key points of a complex geopolitical article you read over breakfast,
Right.
the underlying mechanism of information loss is identical for all of you.
So in the source material, the learner, Paul, he shares a scenario that is almost painful to read
Yeah,
because it's just so familiar.
it really hurts to read.
He spent 2 exhausting hours the night before just staring at a massive list of 50 new vocabulary words.
We've all been there.
We have. He's doing the whole routine. He's writing them down repeatedly. He's reciting them out loud. He's reading them until his eyes blur.
Just absolute draining cognitive effort.
Yes. And the next morning, he remembers exactly 5 of them.
5 out of 50. That is a 10% retention rate for 2 hours of agonizing mental labor.
It's brutal.
It's the kind of failure that makes people just want to give up entirely.
Yeah, I'd want to quit.
The natural human response in that moment is to internalize the failure. We tell ourselves, I just don't have a good memory, or my brain is getting too old for this.
But it's not that at all, right?
Not at all. What we are exploring today proves that this is not a hardware problem with your brain at all. It is entirely a software problem with your methodology.
Okay, let's unpack this methodology problem.
Yeah.
Because trying to learn from a dry list of facts is a lot like trying to build a brick wall without any mortar.
That's a good way to put it.
You can dump a massive pile of loose bricks onto an empty lot, which is exactly what Paul was doing with his 50 vocabulary words.
Right.
But without the mortar to bind them together, it's just a pile of rubble. The input simply does not equal a structural output.
Because the human brain was never evolutionarily designed to retain isolated, sterile data points.
It just doesn't work that way.
Exactly. When you try to memorize a singular piece of data from a list, you are forcing your brain to process it entirely in a vacuum.
There's nothing around it.
Nothing. There's no spatial environment around it. There's no narrative structure, no emotional resonance. It is just a lonely data point floating in a white void.
It's like trying to memorize a random string of numbers, right? Like a 20-digit serial code.
Oh, good luck with that.
Right. You might be able to repeat it back to me in the present moment through just the sheer force of working memory, but 10 minutes later, that information is gone.
The brain aggressively filters out meaningless data to save energy. It's built to do that.
Wait, really? It does it on purpose?
Yes. If a piece of information doesn't have structural connections to something you already know, the brain's memory centers flag it as irrelevant background noise, and they discard it exactly as designed.
But doesn't this completely contradict what almost all of us were taught in school?
Pretty much.
I mean, we are raised on the gospel of flashcards and rote memorization and brute force repetition.
The classic cramming method.
Right. If intense, concentrated hard work, like staring at a list for 2 continuous hours, isn't the answer, what is the alternative?
It's a fair question.
It feels wildly counterintuitive to suggest that intense effort is somehow the enemy of retention, Are we saying effort is actually bad?
What's fascinating here is the distinction between the amount of effort and the type of effort.
Okay, type of effort.
Staring at a list requires high exertion, sure, but it creates very low friction for the brain's associative networks.
So it's working hard but not smart.
Exactly. To actually encode long-term information, the brain requires contextual hooks. It needs to attach that new piece of data onto an existing framework it already structurally understands.
It needs that mortar.
Yes. Without those narrative or emotional hooks, the new information literally has nothing to bind to.
Which brings us directly to how we actually manufacture those hooks.
Right.
The source material outlines a completely different approach to encoding data. They start with what they call contextual learning, which basically means abandoning the dictionary in favor of a narrative story.
And bypassing the dictionary is a profound shift, because a dictionary provides precision without context.
Precision without context.
Yeah, it gives you the exact definition of a brick, but it doesn't help you build the wall.
Okay, the source uses a remarkably clear example of this. Imagine you were reading a story and you come across this sentence. The dog was very hungry, so he ate all the food in his bowl.
Okay, nice and simple.
Now, assume for a moment you have absolutely no idea what the word bowl means, like it's a completely foreign concept to you.
If you approach this mechanically, the old way, you stop reading, you pull out your phone, you look up the word.
And you try to memorize the definition, something like a round, deep dish used for food or liquid.
Right, which is sterile.
But the contextual method asks you to stay in the narrative. Look at the surrounding environment. You already know the concept of a dog. You understand hungry, ate, and food.
Your brain naturally makes a logical leap to fill in the missing gap.
Yes. You deduce that this unknown object has to be some sort of container that a dog eats from. You solve the puzzle without ever opening an app.
And the consequence of that small cognitive deduction is massive.
Why is it so much better?
Because you didn't just learn a definition, you built a vivid mental scene of a hungry dog actively eating from a dish on the floor.
Oh, I see. That's seen as the mortar.
Exactly. The word is no longer an isolated target. It has taken up residence inside a fully realized mental environment.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the act of deducing the meaning actually requires a deeper level of cognitive processing than simply reading a provided definition.
Because you had to work for it.
Right. You had to work for the meaning,
Right.
which signals to the brain that the information is actually valuable.
Now, the source material takes this idea of context and pushes it even further inward.
This is tip number 2, right?
Yeah. If an external story about a fictional dog is good mortar, attaching the information directly to your own identity is like pouring industrial-grade concrete.
I love that.
They call this creating a personal sentence.
Because textbook examples are notoriously sterile.
Oh, they're the worst.
A language book might give you a perfectly grammatically accurate sentence to illustrate a word. Something like, the room is cozy.
Right. It's technically correct, but it's deeply boring.
So boring.
It has absolutely nothing to do with you, your life, or your reality.
And the brain is inherently egocentric.
Is it really?
Oh, completely. Cognitive psychologists refer to this as the self-reference effect. Information that is processed in relation to the self is recalled at significantly higher rates than information processed in literally any other way.
Wow. So we really just care about ourselves.
Pretty much. When you link a new concept to your own life, you activate the default mode network in the brain, which is heavily involved in thinking about ourselves, our memories, and our future.
So Paul, the learner in the source, takes this sterile word, cozy, and he forcefully drags it into his own reality.
He makes it about him.
Yeah, he constructs a new sentence. My apartment is small, but it's very cozy on cold nights. I sit on my sofa with Max in a warm blanket.
That is so much better.
And he explicitly visualizes his actual living room, his actual dog named Max, and his favorite actual blanket.
He has taken a theoretical linguistic concept and anchored it to his own autobiographical memory.
The word cozy isn't just letters on a page anymore.
No, it is inextricably linked to the neurochemical feeling of safety and warmth he experiences in his own home.
Let me raise a practical concern for the listener here, though.
Sure, go for it.
Wait, if we rely on guessing from context instead of a dictionary, or making up our own highly subjective personal sentences, aren't we risking learning the slightly wrong meaning of a concept?
That's a very common fear.
Right. What if your personal sentence is slightly off? Is it really better to be slightly imprecise but retain the broad idea than to have a perfectly accurate, flawless definition that you inevitably forget an hour later?
Honestly, That is the exact trade-off we have to accept.
Really. Just accept being a little wrong.
Yes. If we look at how the brain prioritizes long-term storage, a heavy, imprecise anchor is infinitely more valuable than a perfect, sterile definition that just floats away.
That is fascinating.
The precision of a concept is something you refine over time through continued exposure. You will encounter the word again in different contexts, and your brain will naturally calibrate the nuance.
But you can't calibrate what you don't remember.
Exactly. You cannot refine a memory that doesn't exist. The autobiographical connection guarantees the core concept actually survives the night and makes it into your long-term storage.
That distinction between creating the anchor first and refining the precision later is huge.
It changes everything.
But it does raise a secondary challenge. It is incredibly easy to visualize a dog, a blanket, or a bowl. Those are tangible objects.
Right.
How do we build these massive autobiographical anchors for concepts that are inherently abstract?
Yes.
The deep dive shifts here from narrative context to actual physical embodiment. This is the third tip. They suggest intentionally connecting the new information to the physical senses.
Which is brilliant because we often treat learning as a purely intellectual exercise that happens exclusively behind our eyes.
Right, like we're just brains in vats.
Exactly. We forget that the brain is not a hard drive floating in a jar. It is the command center of a deeply complex nervous system.
Okay, nervous system.
Embodied cognition is the understanding that our physical bodies play a massive role in how we process and store mental information.
The source illustrates this by asking the learner to embody a word rather than just read it. They use the word beach.
Okay, the beach.
Instead of looking at the letters on a flashcard, you are instructed to close your eyes and recruit your physical senses. You force your brain to imagine the feeling of warm sand between your toes.
I can almost feel it.
You actively try to hear the heavy rhythmic crashing of waves. You conjure up the distinct smell of salt in the air and the physical sensation of the sun heating the skin on your shoulders.
By recruiting those senses, you are lighting up entirely different, distinct regions of the brain.
Like what?
Well, you are engaging the olfactory cortex for smell, the auditory cortex for sound, the somatosensory cortex for touch.
Wow, so it's a whole brain workout.
It is. You are creating a web of neural pathways. If you only memorize the spelling of a word, you have one single, fragile pathway to retrieve that memory.
And if you connect it to the senses?
If you connect it to 4 different physical senses, you have given the memory multiple physical routes. It creates crucial redundancy in the neural network.
And what was truly impressive was how Paul applied this sensory web to a completely abstract word. He was trying to learn the word important.
That's a tough one. You cannot draw a simple picture of importance.
No, you can't smell it or hear it either. So he grounded it internally.
How did he do that?
He physically connected the abstract concept of important to the warm, protective, almost heavy physical sensation he feels in the center of his chest when he thinks about his dog, Max.
That is so powerful. He took an entirely formless intellectual idea and gave it a literal physical geography inside his own body.
It's just brilliant.
When abstract information is tethered to a physiological state, its staying power is multiplied exponentially.
Because of the emotional connection.
Exactly. Because it taps into the brain's emotional and physical processing centers, which are evolutionarily much older and stronger than our linguistic centers.
Okay, so we've established this incredibly robust system so far. We're building narrative mortar, we are tying information to our autobiographical memories, and we are rooting concepts deeply into our physical nervous systems.
It's a great foundation.
But, and this is big, but we have to confront the reality of time.
Time.
Even with all of these multisensory anchors, you cannot do this exercise once on a Tuesday and expect perfect permanent recall on a Friday.
No, you definitely cannot.
The source transitions into tip 4, which they call the repeat meet method, or, the necessity of exposure.
This is where we have to respect the biological limits of synaptic consolidation.
Synaptic consolidation sounds intense.
It just means you cannot physically force a permanent neural connection to form overnight, regardless of how vivid the mental imagery
It
is.
just takes time.
Yes, the brain requires repeated activation of that neural pathway to recognize it as vital.
Like, how many times are we talking?
The source notes that a learner needs to encounter a new concept organically, roughly 7 to 10 times before it permanently integrates into their usable knowledge base.
7 to 10 separate encounters? I mean, that feels like a staggering amount of time when you are stressed and trying to learn something quickly.
It is a significant investment of time, but it happens quite naturally if you shift your expectations.
Okay.
The source uses a very beautiful analogy here. Learning is fundamentally an agricultural process, not an industrial one.
I love that. Agricultural, not industrial.
It is exactly like growing a plant. You cannot yell at a seed to make it sprout faster. You cannot pull on a stem to make it grow taller. You provide the necessary conditions: water, sunlight, healthy soil, and then you simply have to wait for the biological process to unfold on its own timeline.
It completely mirrors the experience of recognizing a stranger in your neighborhood.
Oh, how so?
Well, the first time you walk past someone on the sidewalk, they are a total stranger, a complete cipher. Your brain barely even registers their face as you walk by. The third time you cross paths, a tiny spark of recognition happens. You think, I've definitely seen that person by the coffee shop before.
Right, the face is familiar.
By the fifth time, you are giving each other the polite little nod, and by the seventh time, you're waving and you actually know their name.
That's a perfect analogy.
It just takes natural, spaced-out encounters.
Yeah.
You cannot speedrun neighborliness, and you cannot speedrun neural consolidation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, recognizing this biological reality completely relieves the crushing pressure that professionals and students constantly put on themselves.
It really is. You don't feel like you're failing just because you didn't get it instantly.
Exactly. You do not have to conquer 50 complex concepts in one single night. In fact, attempting to do so floods the brain with stress hormones like cortisol, which actually inhibits memory formation.
Wait, stressing about remembering makes you forget.
Yes. Patience and repeated organic exposure across multiple days do the heavy cognitive lifting for you.
Which brings us to the most counterintuitive part of this entire framework.
Oh, this is the best part.
Even with narrative context, even with physical body senses, and even with the patience of repeated exposure over time, the water is still going to leak out.
It is.
We are still going to forget things. And this is where the conversation completely reframes how we view failure.
Tip number 5.
Here's where it gets really interesting. They introduce the concept of the forget and remember cycle. It suggests that forgetting isn't a flaw in the system. It is a necessary feature.
This is perhaps the most transformative psychological shift we can extract from this material.
Because it completely changes how you feel about forgetting.
Yes. We are deeply conditioned by traditional education to view the act of forgetting as a catastrophic failure.
It feels awful. It feels like a massive personal failing.
Yeah.
You sit there thinking, I knew this entire presentation yesterday, and now my mind is entirely blank. I am losing my edge.
But cognitive science offers a radically different paradigm. It's known as desirable difficulty.
Desirable difficulty.
When you forget a concept and you have to genuinely, physically struggle to recall it, that agonizing feeling where the word is right on the tip of your tongue, but you can't quite grasp it,
Yeah, the worst feeling.
your brain is actually engaged in its most critical work in that exact moment. It is identical to lifting a heavy weight at the gym.
Like breaking down a muscle.
Exactly. You have to intentionally stress and break down the physical muscle fibers in order for them to rebuild thicker and stronger.
Wait, really? So that agonizing tip of the tongue frustration that everyone universally hates.
Yeah.
You're telling me that struggle is actually the exact moment my brain is doing the heavy lifting.
Yes.
The struggle, the solution.
The struggle is the mechanism of growth. Easy retrieval does not stimulate the brain.
So if it's easy, you're not learning.
Exactly. If you look at a flashcard and immediately know the answer without any cognitive friction, you haven't strengthened the neural pathway at all. You merely confirmed it exists. But every single time you go around that cycle, learning a concept, inevitably forgetting it, struggling deeply to pull it back up, and then finally remembering it, the neural pathway gets stronger.
The muscle gets bigger.
Yes. The myelin sheath around that neural pathway gets significantly physically thicker. The signal travels faster.
That fundamentally changes how you approach learning anything difficult.
It really should.
You shouldn't ever feel demoralized about forgetting. Forgetting is the biological signal that your brain is actively doing the necessary work to encode that memory permanently.
It removes the shame from the learning process, which is huge. It shifts us from a rigid, mechanical expectation of immediate perfection to a fluid, organic understanding of how human cognition actually functions.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Good question.
These 5 tips aren't just a clever set of tricks for memorizing vocabulary words for a language app. This is a universal blueprint for mastering any overwhelming stack of information in your career or your hobbies.
It applies to literally everything.
If you are trying to ingest a dense industry report or trying to understand the sprawling lore of a new historical hobby you've picked up, this is exactly how you do it without burning out.
You stop squeezing the water so tightly.
Exactly. You find the narrative story, you connect the raw data to your own life and your own physical senses.
You let the information wash over you repeatedly over time.
And, crucially, you completely forgive yourself when you inevitably forget, because that forgetting is just the brain-building muscle.
You know, this architectural view of memory, it raises an important question about our current technological environment.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this, and it's a terrifying thought.
If actively struggling to recall information, that desirable difficulty is the exact mechanism that builds long-term memory muscle, what is happening to our brains in the modern era?
Because we never struggle anymore.
Right. Our default habit is to instantly Google anything we momentarily forget.
Oh, constantly.
We feel that tiny bit of cognitive friction. We don't know the name of an actor or the capital of a country. And within 2 seconds, we bypass the struggle entirely by looking at a screen.
We just pull out our phones.
Yes. And by doing that, we are constantly robbing our brains of the very resistance required to build neural pathways. Is our modern habit actually weakening our brain's natural ability to learn?
We are artificially removing the heavyweights from the mental gym. We're never letting the muscle break down, which means it's never building back stronger.
The friction is where the memory is made.
So the next time you forget a fact or a name or a concept from a meeting, maybe let yourself struggle for a minute before you reach for your phone. Let the memory muscle burn a little bit.
That's good for you.
We started this deep dive talking about the sheer frustration of trying to hold water in a sieve. But if you stop trying to squeeze the water so tightly in your bare hands, and instead just let it naturally water the soil, the context, and the narratives around you.
You end up growing a cognitive garden that actually lasts.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take these tools, apply them to whatever you are learning today, lean into the productive struggle,